friends. Welcome to the virtual platform of the Russian Center for Science and Culture in Belgium. And today we are continuing with our discussion club, the connection point. And I'm happy to introduce to you Tatiana Mitrova, one of our best-known experts in the area of oil and gas and oil, and expert of Russian high-level university, SKOLKOVO Business School of Management. For me personally, it's very important because I have been working for almost 7 years, just close to Tatiana Mitrova University in SKOLKOVO Innovation Center. And I'm very happy to welcome you, Tatiana, and to see just in the font of your appearance here in our Zoom, the photo of SKOLKOVO School of Management, one of the most interesting from the architectural point of view buildings in a close Moscow suburb. So Tatiana, the floor is yours, and Vitaly Mlechin, who is the leader of our discussion group today, please introduce the topic and all this, what will happen today in the evening on our Zoom virtual platform of the Russian Center for Science and Culture in Brussels, and welcome everybody.
Yes, thank you very much, Vera Georgievna. No, of course, I'm not the leader. I'm just a humble moderator. My role is a humble one, but still a very important one, because today we will discuss a very important topic. It's very important for Russia, but it's very important for Europe as well. So we've decided to talk about fossil fuels. Why is it so hard to get rid of them? But why is it so important? You're very welcome to to watch our discussion, to listen to our discussion, but you're very welcome to join us at the conference as well, because, well, everyone who joins us at this conference receives a special bonus, an opportunity to ask your question, and our expert, our tonight's guest, Tatiana Mitrova, will answer. So, Tatiana Mitrova, the floor is yours. And after your speech, I will ask some questions, and of course, all our guests will have the possibility to ask their questions as well. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Vitaly, for your introduction. Vera, thank you for the opening remarks and for bringing attention to the photo behind me. Yes, it is our beautiful campus. Unfortunately, we are all working remotely now, so we can enjoy it on the photos. But I hope that one day I will be able to host all of you and everybody who is watching this broadcast at our really beautiful and amazing campus. But okay, back to our core questions. So fossil fuels and decarbonization. What is the future of the fossil fuels, and why is it so difficult for Russia to get rid of fossil fuels? Well, just to start, a few words about this global trend on decarbonization and energy transition. Actually, it's already fourth energy transition in the history of humankind. So the first one, it has taken place in the mid of 19th century when we started, I mean, our civilization began to replace wood by coal, and it was invention of the steam engine, which has really changed the way how the world is looking like. So it was first industrial revolution, and it had an enormous impact on all our society. The second energy transition, so what is transition? It is actually the changing dominant fuel for the economy. So the second energy transition, it was in the beginning of the 20th century, and obviously it was switching from coal to oil. And it was exactly the time when internal combustion engine was invented, and that the age of motors. So it has again changed the way of commuting. It has changed a lot in the maritime transportation, in our mobility. So that has been really very big change. But starting from the early 1920s, actually, the share of oil in the global primary energy consumption, it was increasing very fast, and it has reached its maximum in 1960s, 1970s, when oil was providing for more than 60% of all energy we are consuming. But it has ended up in a quite dramatic way with all this conflict with OPEC, with the two oil crises, and obviously consumers have realized that they probably do not want to be that much dependent on such a vulnerable fuel. And so the third energy transition has started. It was less evident, but if you look at the figures, it was taking place. It was a replacement of oil and partially coal by natural gas. And on the technology side, it was exactly the time when new, very efficient gas turbines were invented. So it was there was a very clear reason for the consumers to switch to natural gas. It was more profitable and more convenient and more clean. But gas haven't become a dominant fuel. So currently we have like roughly 30% of oil, 25% of coal, 23–24% of natural gas in our fuel mix. I mean, globally, of course, it's different for each specific country, but globally. And the rest is provided by nuclear, hydro, and renewables. So the current fourth energy transition, which is still on the early stage, it is focusing on transitioning from all fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, to the low carbon energy sources, such as renewables. And just to make it clear, if we do not take into account nuclear as low carbon energy source, because there are lots of discussions whether it is low carbon or not. And if we are not taking into account large scale hydropower plants, which are also quite controversial from the environmental point of view, if we are looking only at the modern renewables such as solar, wind, geothermal, and so on, today they are providing for just 3% of the global primary energy consumption, which is still a very small share, but they are growing extremely fast. And each year they are expanding, and even this year, 2020, catastrophic year of COVID-19, actually, according to the preliminary data, both wind and solar capacities globally have increased by 3–5%, while everything else was collapsing. So we see this obvious trend, and we realize that it will take a lot of effort actually to change the global fuel mix. If we are really willing, if we have this clear target to transit from fossil fuel-based economy to the low carbon energy sources. All the previous energy transitions I was referring to, they were driven by the technologies, internal combustion engines, steam engine, gas turbines, and so on. This is the first transition which is organized in a different way. It is primarily policy driven, and then many different technologies come to serve this policy target. We cannot say that this fourth energy transition is only about solar, or only about wind, or only about electricity storage or hydrogen, or there is a long list. There are many different technologies, Add to that digital technologies, which help to put it all together, and distributed energy technologies, all these microgrids and everything else. So it is quite different. We are not talking about one silver bullet which is able to bring us to a new energy age, but rather a large set of different, sometimes competing technologies. Why is it policy driven? And here we are coming actually to the core part of our discussion. It was introduction. Why is it policy driven? For a very simple reason, because we have realized, many countries in the world, politicians, scientists, simple people, corporations, we have realized that actually there is an existential threat ahead of us, much more dangerous and severe than even COVID-19, which is climate change. So just to give an idea, actually, according to the IPCC reports and analysis, if we will follow the current path of global temperature change, then the number of victims and the scale of the economic damage, it will actually exceed everything that we are experiencing right now with the COVID, like more than 10 times. So it's really a great disaster, potential great disaster to the whole our world as we know it. And all the attempts to limit our greenhouse gas emissions, which were made previously, they actually did not succeed. So we are still following very bad trajectory. Current year, it has provided some relief. Sounds good, sounds terrible, but in terms of CO2 emissions, it was not as terrible as the previous years. But as the climate change is driven not by the current emissions, but by the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, actually it is just slightly postponing the moment of catastrophe and this point of non-return. So this call for collective action and for the promotion of the technologies which will help us to live, not only to produce and consume energy, but to do everything that we are doing in our daily life without CO2 emissions, it became the critically important target. And it is driving the European Green Deal. It is standing behind the Chinese decision on these new targets on net zero emissions by 2060. It is driving decisions of Japan, South Korea, and many other countries to go net zero by 2050. It is actually standing behind the new president-elect of the president-elect of the US with his willingness to get back to the Paris Agreement and to incentivize the US Green Deal. So many leaders and many countries and many companies in the world, they realize that actually it is the most urgent burning question, and that real effort should be made in combating this climate change and in decarbonization. So here I think we are all more or less on the same page, though I would say that this whole climate science evidences and the very idea of anthropogenic climate change, anthropogenic nature of the climate change, it is not actually shared by the major part of the society in Russia. So if you talk to the people, there are some polls, public polls, saying that it is less than 50% of Russian citizens who actually believe that there is climate change and that climate change is a threat. In many cases, at least that is my experience, you can find that it is a result of unawareness. People simply do not know. They do not have access to the good quality information. They prefer to see some conspiracy theory standing behind this climate change. So like the West is trying to convince the world about the climate change in order to promote their technologies and in order to undermine energy superpowers such as Russia. So it is changing, obviously. It is changing, but quite slowly, and it takes a lot of effort. And what is probably most concerning is that many people in the who are decision makers, they are also sharing this perception. So it is creating probably the first barrier, the first obstacle for the EU-Russia discussion on climate, because if one side believes that climate change is really happening and the other side is quite skeptical about that, it's really difficult to find common ground and to make an appropriate action from both sides. But then let's even, if we put away this question, leave it aside and just look at the objective reality for Russia. Yeah, then you can understand that basically for the country that is holding number one or two, it is still a discussion, gas reserves in the world, which is ranked like number 5 in terms of global oil reserves and number 4 in terms of global coal reserves, which is second in the world producer of oil after Saudi Arabia, second global natural gas producer after the US, and I believe fourth coal producer after China, Indonesia, and maybe South Africa. I'm not sure that I remember by heart, but I mean, you can see the magnitude. Yeah, and especially if exports of these hydrocarbons are providing for such an important part of the revenues of the state and leading national leaders, I mean, such national champions like Gazprom, Rosneft, and the others, you can imagine that this idea, let's get rid of fossil fuels, it is not regarded as a good proposal at all. Russia is number 1 exporter of gas globally, though it is second in terms of production, but a major part of the gas produced is exported. It is number two oil exporter. So it is, though currently Russia has like 3% of the global GDP and 2% of the global population, it is providing for 11% of the global primary energy production. 5% it is consuming domestically, and 6% it is exporting. So if you put together like million tons of oil equivalent, if you put together all Russian oil exports, oil products, coal, electricity, natural gas, then obviously Russia is, I mean, just from the facts and data, Russia is number 1 energy exporter in the world. And of course, for the energy exporter, it is quite a dramatic change when you are told that, look, probably your export will not be demanded in 20, 30 years. 20, 30 years, for your understanding, it is exactly the investment cycle in the energy industry. So if you build a pipeline, or if you invest in the oil and gas field development, or even if you build an LNG plant, it is assumed that it will serve for at least 30 years. So all the investment decisions that Russian energy companies have to make today, they are about 2050. and they need to know whether their product will be demanded by the market, or probably that will be just sunk investments. So frozen investments which will never pay back, and it is quite a big difference. Yeah? So it is probably the second biggest obstacle in all our discussion between EU and Russia. EU is mainly regarding, as far as I can see, at least from outside EU, is regarding this energy transition and decarbonization as a great opportunity. An opportunity, first of all, of course, to protect climate, but also to incentivize development of the domestic industry, create jobs, create new advanced technologies, get rid from import dependency, by the way. Yeah, it is also, I mean, energy security, it works. While for Russia, it mainly looks at the threats and challenges, not at the opportunities. It is a threat in terms of budget revenues, which means sustainability of the whole political system and economy. It is a threat for the infrastructure development, because for such a huge country like Russia, all the major investments in infrastructure, these are also investments in the energy infrastructure. So if this energy is not needed, probably many regions, especially remote regions like Arctic, they would not be developed. Because why the hell would you go to such a cold region if it is not for potentially good profits for hydrocarbons? And it is also a very big question on the structure of the whole economy. Currently, it is approximately 25% of the Russian GDP, which is provided by the so-called fuel and energy complex, which is oil and gas, but also electricity. According to our very modest calculations, so each year we are producing Global and Russian Energy Outlook, which is looking both at the global energy markets development, but also with a special focus on the Russian situation. And so last year, 2019 Outlook, we made all these analyses, and basically even before the Green Deal and before all these commitments by the Chinese, Japanese and Koreans, it was clear that by 2040 Russian revenues from export and the role of energy sector in GDP and the role of energy sector in the investments will reduce twofold. So then the question is, what will replace it? Yeah, so which industry or any other source of revenues and also places for employment and multiplicators of the economic growth could evolve in Russia instead of traditional fossil fuels? And so far there is no clear answer for this question. So currently I'm already approaching the end of my speech, and then we will turn to questions. But currently the situation is quite controversial. So Russian leadership began to acknowledge the reality of climate change. It started to make some steps for the implementation of Paris Agreement, which it has adopted last year. This year there were several additional orders and decrees which start to create some regulatory framework for CO2 emissions. It is beginning to realize that climate change is also a potential threat, physical threat for Russian economy. I mean, this permafrost destabilization and all these terrible fires in Siberian forests. So these are clear evidences that climate is changing, not only globally, but in Russia in particular. And frankly, in Russia, the speed of climate change is 2-3 times higher than in the rest of the world, because the closer you are to Arctic, the faster is the impact of the climate change. So, but it is still ongoing with lots of contradictions and tensions, and many groups opposing to this discussion, and many climate skeptics, and many stakeholders who are potentially losing a lot of money if any climate regulation is introduced. So I would say, just to end up my speech, that Russia started to move in this direction. We are making the first steps, and the steps are difficult and painful and controversial, but the process has begun. And actually, I hope, Vitaly, you will be able to share those 2 links that I've posted. The first one is on the research that we've made at SKOLKOVO. It was actually the first Russian publication on climate policy, which is bringing together all this data on the climate damage and climate action in Russia. So I think for those who are interested in the topic, you will find lots of data and references, which is probably the most precious thing. And all the actors and stakeholders, so maybe it would be useful for you. And the second link is to our forthcoming event. It is, and I'm really very much inspired looking at it. This will be EU-Russia Climate Conference, the first EU-Russia Climate Conference, December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd this year. So please join. It is absolutely open and free of charge. We will bring together, you can see the agenda at this link. We will bring together commissioners from the European Commission, so people responsible for climate from the European side, scientists, top executives of the industrial companies, but also Russian regulators and Russian scientists and Russian corporations. So there will be lots of topics for discussion, starting from, of course, decarbonization policies of the states, and carbon border adjustment mechanisms and adaptation strategies, and all these, you know, hot and painful issues, going to hydrogen, renewables, Arctic forests, green finance, energy efficiency, I mean, urban development, transportation. So plenty of different angles, and I hope, really, fingers crossed, that it will help to initiate this discussion where we will not just oppose to each other, Europeans saying, go ahead with climate action, and Russians saying, no, 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 stop, we don't want to lose our revenues. But rather looking for the opportunities and areas of mutual interest. What can we do together, which will be not only helping to protect the climate, but also creating some benefits for the both sides. So I'll stop on that and ready to answer your questions.
Oh, thank you very much for your speech. It was very interesting. Well, I've got a lot of questions, but as you can see, our viewers do have questions as well. So we'll start with them. And of course, this question was obvious. I think that, well, the first question is, how is this shift from dependency from oil and gas in Russia is going on? So you told about 2 main things. On the one hand, we have the climate change. On the other hand, we have revenues to the economy from fossil fuels. So what even can be done with that? Because, well, as you have already said, that well, these huge corporations, they have their revenues, and it has to be something huge to make them well, to start to do something else, to change their way of life. So yes, well, what's the situation? And I think that we have to ask one more question in connection with this question. So how is it going on? And maybe it's even more important, do we see, we as humanity, the right way to deal with it, to deal with climate change and well, with these questions?
Great questions. Okay, I will start with the first one on the oil and gas dependency. You know, it is happening. It is happening starting from, it is taking place starting from 2016, but it is unintended. It is due to the dramatic decline of the global oil and gas prices, and during the last year also fundamental shift and this, I would even say, collapse in the volumes of energy exports. So it was not, you know, we did not volunteer for that, but it has happened without our consent. The share of oil and gas revenues in the Russian federal budget, it was approximately 50% starting from 2009, 2010 until 2015, I believe. Now it is fluctuating somewhere between 30 and 40%. So it's much lower, and in this respect, we can say that yes, we are reducing our energy dependency. But frankly, as it is done mainly, as it is accompanied with the reduction of social expenditures and these money allocated for education, healthcare, and so on, I wouldn't say that I am really happy with such a way to reduce oil and gas dependency. Basically, at the moment, I do not see, I'm not a macroeconomist, so it could be a mistake, but given all the information I have access to, I do not see a really increasing diversification of the Russian economy or any other industries flourishing and booming. So it is rather the situation when the whole size of the pie is diminishing. On the specific additional question on the prices for energy resources, we do not know actually what will be the performance, what will be the path of the global demand for oil or for natural gas, for example. I mean, given all the black swans we have seen this year, it is already a bit dangerous to try to predict anything. There are different projections. So some very respectable analysts, including the whole BP team, for example, they are saying that 2019 was the year of global peak oil demand, and that it will never recover, it will never get back. Could be. I mean, if we will end up with a long L-shaped depression, economic recession due to COVID, if it will take several years just to recover our macroeconomic performance globally, then it could well be that global oil demand will not come back to the historical records. And in this case, on the oversupplied market, and the market is definitely oversupplied, all the producers of oil and gas, they are really willing to monetize their resources, or at least to get back their investments in the production capacities that they've made. Of course, they will fight and compete for the consumers, which will obviously lead to, let's say, lower for longer prices for hydrocarbons. The whole situation in the oil market recently has shown that nobody wants a completely open market. Yeah, I mean, we've tried this ideal market in April and nobody liked it. When oil prices went down to $20 per barrel and WTI futures went to minus $50 per barrel. I mean, immediately all proponents of free market and everybody else, they've teamed up in order to create super cartel, which is OPEC plus coalition, because nobody wants so low prices. But so I would say it looks that the global governance, the global oil market or governance at least will evolve in this way, that there will be some coalitions, some quotas, some artificial management of the market in order to sustain more or less acceptable price level, which is currently something like $40 per barrel. It might go down to 30, could be, but again, the market is vulnerable. There will be spikes, there will be periods of insufficient supply because nobody is investing right now. Yeah, so there will be definitely some boom and bust cycle. But frankly, I do not see any chance that we will get back to $100, $140 per barrel anytime. I mean, not only in the next 5 years, but in the longer term perspective, simply because there is such an abundance of oil and gas globally, and so many players who would love to monetize them that so basically, to make it short, I do not think that prices for hydrocarbons will go to their historical heights. Why is it problematic? Because for the Russian Federation, at least, well, to start, I do not think that by 2050 there will be no need for oil and gas. Moreover, I am absolutely convinced that there will be demand both for oil and gas and even coal. But this demand will be lower than today. It will be coming from some specific players, and there will be so many suppliers fighting for the market niche that there will be no resource rent. So this is the major tragedy for Russia. It's not about disappearing demand or lower prices. It is about the whole complex when producing these hydrocarbons is becoming more and more expensive. Yeah, because you are depleting the cheapest fields and you have obviously to go for the more expensive. While the margin is shrinking, it is becoming really tiny, and then there is no resource rent, and then the resource state cannot actually remain resource state any longer. So this is the answer to the question that we've got in chat. And Vitaly, your question, so what could be done with this dependency? You know, there is a new term which is becoming quite popular, just transition. And it is really something we have to discuss, because it's not only Russia. These are many countries like Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Nigeria, Indonesia, and really long list of the countries which are very much dependent on hydrocarbon production and export. Lots of people employed, and if you suddenly remove this source of revenue and source of wealth for all these people, they are actually doomed for poverty and for social conflicts and I mean many other quite nasty things. So what Europeans have experienced actually all that with the coal mines. So you know what it is to close coal mines, all these protests, and it's really very difficult to re-educate these people, to provide them with the new jobs, to refurbish all these coal mines and to recultivate the whole damaged area. So it's not easy. It is requiring a lot of investment. Who is going to invest into Russian mono-cities like Khanty-Mansiysk, Vorkuta, Kuzbas? So Russian Federation, frankly, doesn't have this money. So what will happen with all these workers? What will happen with all these regions completely reliant on hydrocarbon revenues? I don't know. And I'm afraid that there is no answer currently. And it is definitely something for the discussion because it is a universal problem. They will have it in the US, they have it in Poland and in Germany, they will have it in China, Indonesia, Australia, South Africa, and many, many other countries. So maybe there is a role for some international agency, development agencies or whatever, but we will never find it out if we will not discuss it, obviously.
But how much time do we have? So when will this problem become so close in time that we will have to deal with it? Because right now we can still live with it. So we are discussing that in future we will have problems. But right now we, well, don't have many problems. We can still still live with it as we were living for 10 or 20 years. So when will this problem become so important that we won't be able not to do something with it?
You know, Vitaly, I have an impression that it is already very close. I'm now talking not about climate threat. I'm talking about threat for the hydrocarbons. Yeah. So the recent announcements that the European Commission has made on the Green Deal as a whole, but in particular on the development of some sort of carbon border adjustment mechanisms, that is really ringing bell. And I would say it has woken up all Russian establishment because they've realized that it is something really challenging the whole current business model. It can be introduced in the next, let's say, 3-5 years. So it's really near term. And it is directly targeting all Russian energy exports and energy-intensive products exports like steel, aluminium, fertilizers, and everything else. So if you look, for example, at coal, which is still exported to Europe, and it is very important part of the welfare of, let's say, Kuzbas region. Yeah, they are mainly exporting to Europe. If carbon border taxes are introduced, with the price of coal at, let's say, 40 euro per ton, they will have to pay something like 30 euro per ton of carbon. Mm-hmm. And then you add production and transportation costs and you immediately find yourself losing money. So it is, this tax is completely killing Russian coal exports to Europe, yeah, just to begin with. It is less dramatic for oil and gas, but also depends on the particular sort of oil and particular route and way of transportation. But this is something we do not know the details. We do not know how it will be applied. What will be the level of this tax? So will it be the same as ETS cost of CO2, or will it be different? But anyway, it is creating, you know, some very clear incentive, at least to try to understand how to adapt to that.
So we will adapt to that.
I wish I knew, but I mean, we do not have basically any other choice. Mm-hmm. We can make it more painful or less painful. We can try to find some opportunities and benefits, which are numerous, I would say. I mean, if Russia would decide to make a bet on the green technologies, it has enormous potential. We are #1 in the world in terms of wind potential, for example, and I mean, hydrogen production, lots of opportunities. So theoretically, we could make this transition smooth. And the earlier we start to invest in this transition, the more comfortable it will be. If we are refusing to admit it, if we are ignoring it as long as possible, then we have problems. You know, it is very much reminding me of the whole situation with the third energy package. Remember, when first Russian domestic discussion was, oh, come on, the Europeans, they will never adopt it. It is crazy. Yeah, it is, relax. We will solve the issue. So let's go ahead and build South Stream and Nord Stream and something else. And yeah, we will go downstream and we will start to control all the European gas distribution networks. That was the plan of Gazprom, by the way, yeah. Official plan. Yeah. Then it was first stage. Second stage, they are adopting it. Why the hell? It is contradicting WTO. It is unfair. We are investing our money in the pipelines and they will kill our whole business. They should have consulted with us. And the third step, we hate third energy package, but we have to cancel South Stream and we are losing a lot of money. Gazprom is canceling its whole downstream strategy, again losing a lot of money. And we have to adapt to this new reality. Yeah, but we have spent already quite enormous amount of money and it will never pay back. And we have partially lost our credibility as a reasonable counterparty. Yeah. So I hope that this time we will be more open-minded and flexible and more fast to adapt to these changes, because at the end of the day, the client is always right. So yes. It is buyer's market. We cannot dictate that fossil fuels are better, you are simply stupid, you do not understand it, but believe us, oil and gas is better for you. Europeans will not buy it.
Oil and gas, and especially coal, are cheap. These new technologies are expensive, and well, you have to invest a lot of money in the development of these technologies. And as far as I'm concerned, right now, they are not as efficient as many would like them to be. Of course, they are developing, but still. And well, my point is, so aren't the Europeans making worse for themselves when they are cutting off Russian energy imports? Because these chains of supply are already built, they exist. They work well, and won't be there problems if the Europeans just switch to new energy sources too fast. So here's the balance between the supplier and the user. So the consumer, of course, the consumer is always right, but if the consumer doesn't have anything to consume, he suffers as well. So we have to find this balance, right? Or am I mistaken somewhere?
You are absolutely right in the general approach. So, of course, if tomorrow European Union would announce we've decided to switch off all supplies of hydrocarbons from Russia, from Norway, from Algeria, from elsewhere, that will be a catastrophe. Yeah, so it will not be possible to replace this energy by any other sources. But as far as I can see, the EU policy in this respect is quite cautious and balanced, and nobody is talking about getting rid of fossil fuels tomorrow or after tomorrow or even by 2030. It is a transition and it is a process which is creating conditions to get rid of fossil fuels by 2050, yeah, which is already quite a long time horizon. I would say from the modeling point of view, it looks quite feasible and doable. On the cost side, look, during the last 10 years, renewables, their costs have dropped dramatically. So there was an incredible learning curve for solar, for wind, actually also for electricity storage, and now we see similar curve starting for hydrogen. So currently, with the best technologies, with the best available technologies, I would say that solar and wind, in many, together with the electricity storage, yeah, to back up, to provide their, to compensate for their intermittency, altogether they are in most of the cases they are competitive with the fossil fuels, if we take into account the price of CO2. If we forget about CO2, then obviously coal is the cheapest. Yeah, but if you add this 30 euro per ton of CO2 emission, then the balance is shifting. And if we assume, and Europe has already introduced this CO2 pricing, and we see that the prices are rising, and we can expect them to rise further. And then I believe that coal will become simply economically inefficient, at least in Europe. But I would say China is now starting to do nearly the same, not even mentioning Japan. Even with the clean coal technologies, so with the most modern, lowest emission technologies, they have much lower pollution, air pollution, yeah, all these hard particles content in the emission, but they still produce a lot of CO2 emissions, which is not visible. You cannot smell it, you cannot feel it, but it is there. So either it should be coal and let's say natural gas with CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage, or actually renewables plus electricity storage seems to be more attractive. Don't forget also some tricky thing with the project economics. You have CAPEX and you have OPEX. Capital expenditures, which you make up front, which are quite high for the renewables, but lower for the hydrocarbons. But then you have OPEX, operational expenditures, which are very low for renewables and really much higher for fossil fuels, because you have to pay for fuel. Yeah, for fuel supplies. So given zero price of capital, you can easily understand that it makes much more sense to invest in high capex, low opex story, rather than to go for higher opex. So if you calculate IRR of the whole project for a 30-year time, then from the financial point of view, currently in Europe, given European financial system and regulation, it really makes more sense to invest in renewable energy, maybe some natural gas, but quite limited and very much depending on the structure of the grid and a specific situation in the particular region. But definitely not in coal. So I don't see business case for coal-fired generation in Europe any longer. It is nearly killed from the investment point of view. And also don't forget that most likely investors will not give you money for a coal-fired power plant. It is another thing, this change of the perception of the investment community, when even the World Bank has announced last year that it is refusing from financing any oil assets. So not even mentioning coal. So coal is not to be mentioned in this society. It will not be an easy transition for the Europeans. There are lots of technical challenges, how to integrate renewables into the grid, how to provide for its reliability, how to replace fossil fuels, not in the electricity generation, but in the direct fuel consumption, like in steel making industry, for example, or even if we are talking about mobility. So should it be electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles? It's still not a clear vision, but I think that assuming all the enormous funds allocated for these R&D and for the development of these new networks and new vision of the energy system, I think that it is achievable. I had a very interesting conversation a couple of months ago with Laszlo Varro, who is chief economist at the International Energy Agency. They were just preparing the World Energy Outlook 2020, which was published just a week ago. They've modeled two scenarios. One is like case as usual, so current policies and fossil fuels and everything. And the second one with the new policies with a decarbonization scenario. And basically in terms of investments, they are comparable. So it was different 5-10 years ago. Decarbonization was far more expensive than traditional pathway. But right now, with all this progress in technologies, with these differences in the cost of capital, with the new regulation and new taxation, actually they are becoming comparable. But with the decarbonization, you are also avoiding incredible climate damage, which is many times bigger than all these expenditures altogether.
So yes, you are talking as if it was decided. So there is I guess no other way. You can stop the progress. But are these renewable green technologies really so green? Because well, you can see a lot of articles, a lot of news stating that there are a lot of problems with these technologies. For example, these windmills, they make earth soil on which they stand warmer, and that makes this greenhouse gas. By themselves, they produce less emissions. But if we take into account this, well, their impact on soil, then we can realize that they damage the atmosphere as well. So, and there are a lot of these examples. So, when will we be able to say, to be 100% sure that these green technologies are really green and they are better than anything that we have now?
Well, I'm afraid we will never be able to say that any technology is 100% green, because any technology will have some influence on the ecosphere. Yeah, formally, when we are talking about green technologies, we mean that it is zero carbon emission. Yeah, but damage with the water pollution or soil damage or any other types of damages, which can be really numerous, it should also be taken into account. So from the environmental point of view, the number of risks and damages is much bigger. But so it is an ideal point that we want to reach, but I'm not sure that it is achievable in the future. What we can do is these incremental changes, so the technology which is better than the previous one, both coal and let's say renewable generation, they are producing some carbon footprint, but the carbon footprint of the windmill, if we go through the whole life cycle analysis, how much energy was and materials were used in order to build this windmill. Yeah, what is the detailed carbon footprint? It is definitely many times lower than for the coal-fired power plant. So we anyway there will be some emissions. So in order to achieve zero carbon target, Actually, we have to make additional efforts, either through managing natural things and like forestry and peats and so on, which is a very important component of the Paris Agreement, by the way, or through direct air capture, so carbon capture from the atmosphere, yeah, some compensation mechanisms. So it could be, there are numerous ways how to absorb additional greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. I think we'll have to go for that in order to compensate for this diminishing but still existing carbon footprint of the energy sector. And this is, by the way, opening quite good perspectives for the green hydrocarbons. I know that it sounds like oxymoron. It's quite controversial, but nevertheless, there are already there are some terms like green oil, which is oil which carbon footprint has been compensated by pumping CO2 into the field for enhanced oil recovery. So in Texas, for example, they have several such enterprises. They capture CO2 on the industrial plants, not far from the field. Then they pipe this CO2 to the production site and put it under the pressure into the ground, thus increasing oil production. And this oil is net zero. So therefore, it is called green oil.
It's almost impossible to believe.
It works in Texas. They have like $45 per ton price of CO2. So it is commercially attractive. It really makes sense. So there are new business models evolving around all this regulation. Or, for example, green LNG. There have been already several green LNG cargoes sold to Japan and to Europe. Why is it green? Because the whole carbon footprint is compensated by the forestry. So Shell has done it, Total has recently done it. So they are planting trees, and each LNG cargo has this certificate for, I don't know, million of planted new trees. And consumers, so they can illustrate that it is net zero. So in this case, they can keep using gas, but it is compensated elsewhere. So there are some technological solutions, some financial and organizational solutions like what I've mentioned. And I think that fossil fuels, they will remain a part of the transition, but they have to really change a lot, and they will still not be able to provide for this resource rent as in the past. So anyway, diversification of the economy and finding some new sources of economic growth, they are absolutely the must for our country, I believe.
Thank you very much. We already talking more than an hour. It's past 10 in Moscow, so I guess we have to sum up. And well, I realized that you can stop progress. That, as you have just said, world will change, and everything that we know will change. And we've already seen this, how world can change very fast with this coronavirus. So how easy it is with the new technologies to organize our new lives, how it is easy to communicate between Russia and Belgium, between Brussels and Moscow. And maybe we can expect something similar from the energy sector. Maybe hopefully not this year, but maybe in some coming years something will happen. Maybe some invention, scientific invention, some new technology will be made, which will make it possible to switch from fossil fuels to green fuels. And of course, that will help us, well, curb this climate change, which is very important because, well, our children will have a better planet to live on. Thank you very much. Tatiana Mitrova was with us, an energy expert. We were talking about energy, fossil fuels, green fuels, and we were talking about what will happen with our energy sector, I mean Russian and European, because we're close neighbors and we depend on each other, and we have to develop well, close to each other and to our mutual benefits. Let's put it this way.
Tatiana, and I would like also to thank you for your time and for your involvement in our program. I think that it's really very important to make this kind of event and invite speakers and experts of your level. So we wish our best wishes. Good luck to your conference on December 2020. And we hope, I hope personally that when the coronavirus will be over, we can host you here in Brussels, in Russian Center for Science and Culture in Belgium, not in its virtual platform, but really on a business meeting or on a scientific seminar here in Brussels. You are always welcome. Thank you so much for your participation.
Or even if you come to Brussels on vacation, we will be happy to see you as well. Thank you very much. We thank all of our viewers and listeners, and of course we are waiting for you at our events, which are very well. We host many events, but all of them are virtual now. But hopefully, well, maybe in the beginning of next year, we will be able to live our normal lives. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.